Hello, and welcome to day 3 of reading the Book of Mormon with me. I am a true believer in the Book of Mormon, and I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So if you are a warm, open-hearted person who really wants to understand why we believe what we believe, then you've come to the right place. I'll be reading this from cover to cover with you and giving my insights so you kind of can see this through the eyes of a believer. If you want to read along with your own copy, be sure to see the links in the description for ways that you can read along. So this testimony of the prophet Joseph Smith that we're going to start with, that is where he tells his story about how the Book of Mormon came to be. Because of course, there was a day where he was just going along being a normal farm boy before he ever had any idea that he was going to translate this book and someday become the prophet of a movement. He didn't ever set out to do that, but then a series of events and it ends up becoming, the main focus of his life. So just a little bit of backstory before I read you the testimony of, his testimony of how the Book of Mormon came to be. He was raised during the early 1800s. He was 14 years old in 1820 when he saw his very first theophany, where he saw Jesus Christ and God appear to him when he said his first prayer, which is before this story even starts. This story starts like 3 years later. But he was involved in a time period called the Second Great Awakening in the North American colonies. And that was where there was so much excitement around religion and who was right, what religion people were going to choose, what teachings were the correct ones. It was kind of like the most trending and exciting thing going on in society in the New England states was religion. And there was this huge marketplace of different religious ideas, various Protestant breakoff groups, Calvinist groups, and so forth that would stage these big events where they would preach and teach and try to bring different followers into the faith. And among Joseph's family, there was even division. Joseph's dad decided to remain unaffiliated. His mother chose to follow the Methodists. Some of Joseph's siblings chose different groups, but it was definitely a period of a lot of tumult and confusion and excitement, not only in the community, but also in Joseph Smith's family. And this is, in American history, it's known as the Second Great Awakening, with all of this religious excitement. It was just under 100 years previous, in the 1700s, before the Revolutionary War, that there was the First Great Awakening, because as the population is rising on this North American continent, there's this excitement around the opportunity for a religious marketplace of ideas. It doesn't matter how you see religion. You can have your own breakoff group, or you can receive revelation, or you can start a utopic society, which was a really big thing at various points as well. And you can do this in the name of God. You can amass followers. You're not going to be stopped by the government. You have all the freedoms in the world to try to establish these movements. And so in the 1700s, there was a great awakening then, and then it reared its head again just under 100 years later in the early 1800s, where again the marketplace of religious ideas were just the hot excitement, just like we might have really great excitement about, are we going to go to Mars? Is China going to fall? I don't know, all kinds of things that people are excited about today. Back then, one of the big things was religion and who was right and what people believed, and they'd talk about it in the streets and they'd talk about it at the stores, and it was quite a big thing. So Joseph Smith was a religious-minded person. He was a young farm boy who was raised in a large family that was, they were poor. They had to work all the time, on their farm and taking in odd jobs to get by. But they talked about the Bible and read the Bible and prayed as a family, and he was very concerned about, his soul and what religions were right and so forth. So when he was 14, he went and prayed in the grove of trees, and that was the beginning of his experience, where he saw God appear to him and tell him, don't join any of these churches, they're not right. But it was 3 years before Joseph got very much in the way of further instruction. So he had to sit there from ages 14 to 17, just being told, don't join these churches, but he wasn't really given any specific direction of what to do from there. So now we are dropped into the story when he's about 17, and that is where we pick up on this testimony of Prophet Joseph Smith. So these are his own words about the coming forth of the Book of Mormon, which I think would be really exciting to know if you are wanting to understand the Book of Mormon, that this is an earnest, honest-hearted farm boy who did not have an education. He did not have an agenda to go out there and start a religion or ever write a book, but it kind of just happened for him. And so here's his story. On the evening of the 21st of September, 1823, I betook myself to prayer and supplication to the Almighty God. And remember, this is 3 years after he'd had that initial vision where he was told not to join a church. And I'm pretty sure he was torn up about like, gosh, 3 years of not having additional direction, and I'm not supposed to join a church, but what do I do? So I'm sure he was frustrated. So while in this act of calling upon God, I discovered a light in my room, which continued to increase until the room was lighter than at noonday, when immediately a personage appeared at my bedside, standing in the air, for his feet did not touch the floor. So, of course, this is an angel. He had on the loose robe of most exquisite whiteness. It was a whiteness beyond anything earthly I had ever seen, nor do I believe that any earthly thing could be made to appear so exceedingly white and brilliant. Okay, so, when you're trying to explain something that no one else can see, it's like he's saying, nothing can possibly be this white. So, okay, his hands were naked and his arms also a little above the wrist, and his feet also were naked, as were his legs a little above the ankles. And don't get thrown off by the word naked, that's just the word that they used back then, so it's not that big of a deal. His head and neck were also bare, and I could discover he had on no other clothing but this robe as it was open, so I could see into his bosom. So again, don't get creeped out by that description. That's just the way he said it. It just looks like he's wearing something loose and flowy, and it's a pretty simple robe or whatever. So not only was his robe exceedingly white, but his whole person was glorious beyond description, and his countenance truly like lightning. The room was exceedingly light, but not so very bright as immediately around his person. Again, he's trying to put into words, what is it like to see this angel? He's so bright, but the brightness is more clustered around his body. When I first looked upon him, I was afraid, but the fear soon left me. I think that's a pretty normal response when people see angels. Anytime you read about an angelic visitation in the scriptures, people are, kind of scared at first, probably because that's like the last thing you're expecting to see in any given moment of your life. Okay, he called me by name and said unto me that he was a messenger sent from the presence of God to me, and that his name was Moroni, and that God had a work for me to do, and that my name should be had for good and evil among all nations, kindreds, and tongues, or that it should be both good and evil spoken of among all people. Okay, and that prophecy has become 1,000% true. He's being told that there's a big thing God's going to have you do. He was probably like, oof, I'm 17. I just wanted some information from heaven. I wasn't looking to do anything too crazy. But then he's told that people are going to say really good things and really bad things about him, and all over the world too. So that is totally true, because if you want to read anything good or bad about Joseph Smith, just type in his name and you'll see everything good and bad about him. He said there was a book deposited, written upon gold plates, giving an account of the former inhabitants of this continent, and the source from whence they sprang. He also said that the fullness of the everlasting gospel was contained in it, as delivered by the Savior to the ancient inhabitants. Okay, so there's a book buried somewhere. It's on these gold-type plates, and they tell the story of North American inhabitants. Pretty cool. Continuing on, and also there were 2 stones in silver bows, and these stones fastened to a breastplate constitute what is called the Urim and Thummim, deposited with the plates, and the possession and use of these stones were considered seers in ancient or former times, and that God had prepared them for the purpose of translating the book. So he's being told there's this like little thing that looks like eyeglasses. They're 2 stones in this bow type thing that you can look and help use to translate. And also there was a breastplate in there along with it, for whatever reason, just an artifact, I guess. Anyway, so if you want to go down the rabbit hole of, hey, that's weird, seer stones, why would God do that? And that sounds really like superstitious and bizarre. I would say God has always done kind of strange things with his prophets, and God does things the way he wants to do them, and he doesn't usually do things the way we think is cool, hip, comprehensible, totally sweet, 1,000% scientific, and never at all upsetting. He does things the way he does things. And when we don't like it, that is more of an us thing. It's not a God thing. It's not like, hey, God, you did that wrong. That was really weird that you did it that way. It's more like, hey, when has God ever done things in a way that everyone's all hip with? Never. Okay. So we can all just say, hey, if God chose to do it this way, that's an us thing if we have a problem with it. So again, he told me that when I got those plates of which he had spoken for the time that they should be obtained was not yet fulfilled, I should not show them to any person. So when he does someday get these gold plates, that he's not supposed to show them to anyone, but it's not yet. It's not happening yet. Neither the breastplate with the Urim and Thummim, only to those to whom I should be commanded to show them. And if I did, I should be destroyed. So God's not playing games. He's like, don't toy with me here. You do it my way or you won't be doing it. Okay? So while he was conversing with me about the plates, the vision was open to my mind and I could see the place where the plates were deposited. And that so clearly and distinctly that I knew the place again when I visited it. After this communication, I saw the light in the room begin to gather immediately around the person of him who had been speaking to me, and it continued to do so until the room was again left dark, except just around him, when instantly I saw, as it were, a conduit open right up into heaven, a portal, shall we say? And he ascended till he entirely disappeared, and the room was left as it had been before this heavenly light had made its appearance. So the earthly messenger, the angel Moroni, gets sucked up in a shaft of light, and he's gone. I lay musing, I love the way he says, this is hilarious. I lay musing on the singularity of the scene and marveling greatly at what had been told to me by this extraordinary messenger. The way I'd put that is he was feeling totally freaked out. Musing on the singularity of the scene, I would say that's pretty freaked out. When, in the midst of the meditation, I suddenly discovered that my room was again beginning to get lighted, and in an instant, as it were, the same heavenly messenger was again by my bedside. So he didn't get much of a recovery moment there, because back pops the messenger into his bedroom. He commenced and again related the very same things which he had done at his first visit, without the least variation, which having done, he informed me of the great judgments which were coming upon the earth, with great desolations by famine, sword, and pestilence, and that these grievous judgments would come on the earth in this generation. Having related these things, he again ascended as he had done before. So, okay, God's using the principle of repetition. He's like, I'll tell you once, but you might, wake up in the morning and think it was a weird, like some bad fish that you ate, So we're going to do this again so you don't get confused about whether it actually happened or not. And then he adds on top of the story, the angel adds, there's going to be a lot of judgments and, end time calamities that are coming to the earth in this generation. So don't get hung up on the in this generation as in, before grandpa dies, kind of in this generation. God's use of in this generation could be a little more broad as in this particular swath of time. So we're going to let God define how long in this generation means and not get all bent out of shape because it didn't happen within the next 15 or 20 years. Okay, by this time, so deep were the impressions upon my mind that sleep had fled from my eyes. So I guess the first vision didn't give him insomnia, but the second one did, right? And I lay overwhelmed in astonishment at what I had both seen and heard. But what was my surprise? Then again, I beheld the same messenger at my bedside and heard him rehearse and repeat over again to me the same things as before. So the angel and God are like, okay, 2 times is great. I think the message is kind of settling in a little bit, but we want you to never forget and to not even consider having your mind wander from anything other than this topic. So we're going to say it to you just one more time. And by the way, as parents, do we not ever repeat ourselves 3 times when we really want the person to get it? So anyway, okay. So he repeated over the same things as before, and this time added a caution that Satan would try to tempt me in consequence of the indigent circumstance of my father's family to get the plates for the purpose of getting rich. This he forbade me, saying I must have no other object in view other than the glory of God and must not be influenced by any other motive than that of building his kingdom. Otherwise, I could not get them. So he's saying, easy, boy, you and your family are poor. I get it. But just because these plates are going to be made of some valuable metal once I actually let you unearth them. Don't be thinking you can melt these down and sell them and get rich. Because if you even think about it, you're toast. This is not going to be your job anymore. I'll find somebody else to do it. After the third visit, he again ascended into heaven as before, and I was again left to ponder on the strangeness of what I had just experienced, when almost immediately after the heavenly messenger had ascended from me the third time, the cock crowed, which is a rooster, by the way, and I found that the day was approaching, so that our interviews must have occupied the whole of that night. So that was quite a night, wouldn't you say? Quite a tiresome night. I shortly arose from my bed and, as usual, went to the necessary labors of the day. Can we just say this guy, that Joseph Smith was not a millennial or a Gen Xer? Or what? Wait, which generation is it? The one right now where everybody's lazy? The youngest ones, where everybody's, struggling with a work ethic. He does not struggle with a work ethic. He was up all night long talking to 3 angels and didn't get any sleep. But as soon as it's time to get up and milk the cows and work in the field, he pops out of bed because he knows that's what he's supposed to do. Kids these days, they'd for sure be like, oh, I was really busy at night doing things and I can't get up right now. But okay, he had a great work ethic. But in attempting to work at other times, I found my strength so exhausted as to render me entirely unable. My father, who was laboring along with me, discovered something to be wrong with me and told me to go home. I started with the intention of going to the house, but in attempting to cross the fence out of the field where we were, my strength entirely failed me, and I fell helpless to the ground. For a time was quite unconscious of anything. So he tries to, cross a fence and he just kind of falls to the ground. That's pretty tired. I was pretty much that tired like a week ago from something, and I went to bed at 6 o'clock, so I know how tired that can be, but he was probably more tired than that, probably. The first thing that I can recollect was a voice speaking unto me, calling me by name. Oh boy, here it goes again. It's another vision. I looked up and beheld the same messenger again, standing over my head, surrounded by light as before. He then again related to me all that he related the previous night, and commanded me to go to my father and tell him of the vision and the commandment which I had received. I obeyed, and I returned to my father in the field and rehearsed the whole matter to him. Which I have to say, okay, so how did the morning go before that, when he'd had those 3 visions and he was working with his father? Was he not thinking, wow, that was a lot that just happened last night, but I'm not going to say anything to Dad because I don't really know where to start. Probably something like that. But okay, so he's told he needs to tell his father about it. So he did. He goes ahead and tells his father. Probably kind of intimidating, because how do you even know where to start with something like that? It would be a little bit like, hey, I saw an angel 3 times. In fact, he was in my room all night long. That would be a little bit of a strange way to start a conversation. So his dad replied. He replied to me that it was of God and told me to go and do as commanded by the messenger. I left the field and went to the place where the messenger had told me that the plates were deposited. And owing to the distinctness of the vision which I had had concerning it, I knew the place the instant I arrived there. So his dad believed him and gave him time off to go find this area out in the hills, wherever that is, where these gold plates are buried. Convenient to the village of Manchester, Ontario County, New York, stands a hill of considerable size and the most elevated of any in the neighborhood. On the west side of the hill, not far from the top, under a stone of considerable size, lay the plates deposited in a stone box. This stone was thick and rounding in the middle on the upper side and thinner towards the edges, so that the middle part of it was visible above the ground, but the edge all around was covered with earth. So he gives us a nice physical, almost tangible description of what this stone looked like, how it, mounded up in the middle and it was flat around the edges, so you could cover it with dirt, and it covered the stone box nicely. Having removed the earth, I obtained a lever, which I got fixed under the edge of the stone, and with a little exertion raised it up. I looked in, and there indeed did I behold the plates, the Urim and Thummim, and the breastplate as stated by the messenger. The box in which they lay was formed by laying stones together in some kind of cement. In the bottom of the box were laid 2 stones crossways of the box, and on these stones lay the plates and the other things with them. So again, very lovely description. I made an attempt to take them out, but was forbidden by the messenger, and again informed that the time for bringing them forth had not yet arrived. Neither would it until 4 years from that time. But he told me I should come to that place precisely in 1 year from that time, and he would therefore meet with me, and I should continue to do so until the time should come for obtaining the plates. So at this time, he would be like 17 years old. So he's told it's going to be 4 more years before you can take these plates. So that would make him 21 when he was actually of age. So he would have had the first vision at 14. Not a whole lot happened for 3 years, which is great because his brain had to develop a little bit and, ponder on all the stuff that he saw before. And then yearly from ages 17 through 21, he, had that series of 4 visions that one day when he was 17. And then every year until he was 21, he was to meet back with the messenger at the location of those plates. And then when he was 21, he would be allowed to take them. So he's getting tutored and coached, and he's knowing, what would that be? The 4 plus the 3, that'd be 7-year period of preparation before he's even allowed to get the plates, which is great. It's this entire adolescent period where he is learning more about God, learning more about his probably just growing up with more spiritual awareness and growing up into be a man that is old enough to start at least the initial stages of restoring the gospel on the earth and, of course, translating the Book of Mormon. So accordingly, as I had been commanded, I went at the end of each year, and at each time I found the same messenger there and received instruction and intelligence from him at each of our interviews, respecting what the Lord was going to do and how and in what manner his kingdom was to be conducted in the last days. Can you imagine what a unique experience that would have been to be such a young boy and coming of age man, to be having a series of, I have never taken the time to count all the visions that are on record that Joseph Smith had, but there are so many of them, which explains why this young, unlearned farm boy was an eloquent, knowledgeable prophet. By the time he died, he was like absolutely knowledgeable. He could describe heaven. He could describe even Paul the Apostle from the New Testament as if he had conversed and walked with him. So it feels to me, my experience is that he lived on the earth, but a good portion of his life was not actually earthly because he spent so much time with angels. Okay, we're rounding the corner to the end. At length, the time arrived for obtaining the plates. Again, he would have been 21, and at this time he would have been married. The Urim and Thummim and the breastplate on the 22nd day of September, 1827, having gone as usual at the end of another year to the place that they were deposited, the same heavenly messenger delivered them up to me with this charge, that I should be responsible for them, that if I should let them go carelessly or through any neglect of mine, I should be cut off, but that if I would use all my endeavors to preserve them until he, the messenger, should call for them, that they should be protected. So some portions of the story that are kind of like deleted out because they're trying to make this shorter here is that he had gotten married, which is really, I think, significant. I've had some good conversations with other people that it is significant that he was not really allowed to take those plates until he was of age and married. He needed that support. He needed the maturity, and his wife was an incredible, patient, loving support with him. In fact, she drove the wagon and helped him that night that he got the gold plates. And if you drill in and read more of the stories around him getting the plates, there were mobs that were trying to grab them from him and people always trying to steal them. It was pretty intense. So I soon found out the reason why I had received such strict charge to keep them safe, and why it was that the messenger has said that when I had done what was required at my hand, he would call for them. For no sooner was it known that I had them, that the most strenuous exertions were resorted to for that purpose. What he's trying to say is people were trying to grab the plates all the time, not just that night, like through the night as he's trying to get them home. People were trying to get them from him, and he actually had to wrestle somebody off and sprained his thumb. But as the period of time where he had them while he was working on the translation, they were often at risk for being stolen as well. The persecution became bitter and severe, more bitter and severe than before. So the persecution he had when he had the very first vision when he was 14, he was mocked and made fun of mercilessly for saying that he had seen God. So now there's even more of it. More persecution. Multitudes were on the alert continually to get the plates from me if possible, but by the wisdom of God, they remained safe in my hands until I had accomplished by them what was required at my hand. When, according to arrangements, the messenger called for them, I delivered them up to him, and he has them in his charge until this day, being the 2nd day of May, 1838. So he wrote this in 1838, but in 1830, is when the Book of Mormon was published and the church was officially established. So 1820 was the first vision. 1823 is when he saw Moroni telling him about the gold plates. 1827, he would have gotten the gold plates, and then it took a little while to get all the resources to be able to actually sit down and translate. And then when he actually did his marathon translating session, it was just in like 80 some odd days. And then the angel took the plates back and the Book of Mormon was published. For a more complete account, see the Joseph Smith history in the Pearl of Great Price. And I will link that complete account in the description below. So if you want to read the more complete story, that'll be there. I'm also going to link to a movie. I'm not sure which one yet. There's a couple different ones, but I'll find one that I like that kind of goes over the story of Joseph Smith translating the Book of Mormon. The ancient record thus brought forth from the earth as the voice of a people speaking from the dust, and translated into modern speech by the gift and power of God, as attested by divine affirmation, was first published to the world in the year 1830 as the Book of Mormon. Okay, so that is the end of the testimony of the prophet Joseph Smith. Look in the description for some great resources, and I'll see you in the next video where we do the brief explanation about the Book of Mormon, and then we can finally start into the actual text. See you then!